He found my brother lying down on the street. The blood was coming out, spreading.
The gang leaders, it's almost like they're using the younger children to shoot and do stuff that they want them to do, so they don't come in trouble. You get them, you go to jail, it's your life that's being messed up.
As I put my hand here on my stomach, I noticed that there is a blood. And then I cried back to my son and said, "My son, I am shot." My grandson was 4 months old. He was on my back by that time and he was crying. So my second-born son took him out saying, "Mom, I wonder if he's not shot."
Witnessing violence and experiencing violence lead to the same kinds of consequences. Post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and sometimes children become aggressive because they act out their distress.
My grandson was 4 months old by that time, and then he had a chest problem. So I took him to Alex Clinic. I put my grandson on my back. And then I saw two men coming closer to me. I feel something on my right side of my body, like my leg and my arm. I saw a spark light on my stomach. So my right side became numb. As I put my hand here on my stomach, I noticed that there is a blood. And then I cried back to my son and said, "My son, let's go back to the clinic and need some help because I am shot." My grandson was on my back by that time and he was crying. So my second-born son took him out saying, "Mom, I wonder if he's not shot." But luckily he was not shot. I spent 3 weeks at the hospital, and then when I came back, when he looked at me, he started crying. I don't know what was happening. When I said to him, "Just come, my son," and then he will just go away from me.
The family reported the random attack to police, but with little to go on, nothing ever came from the case. While still reeling from the shock and recovering from the gunshot wound, one of Vuyiswa's biggest fears became reality. One of her sons would become part of the grim crime statistics in Alexandra.
There were some guys here. They were fighting. And we're from the same place. They are not even some guys because they are kids. 18 and 19 or 19 and 20. Yes. They were fighting with knives. And then my son said to him, "Oh, you accuse us. And then you embarrass us. Don't do this."
The youths turned on Vuyiswa's son in a brutal and bloody attack.
I heard some people crying outside. And then when I got out with my husband, my son, was stabbed on the neck by those kids. And then the blood was coming out of his neck like a tap water. I haven't seen such a blood.
He found my brother lying down on the street. The blood was coming out, spreading. I can't face the people who killed him, and I just being scary because I don't know either they will do what or what are they planning, and I'm so scared now. Alexandra is too scary and not safe. I want to go to practice for soccer because I think it can take me far and I can take my family out of this shack.
I thank God because my kids are very strong. It's only this 13-year-old boy who is still weaker. He doesn't want us to mention the name. He even came to this house, I'm sure it was last week, to this room of my son. And then he said to me, Mom, when I'm at my brother's room and looking at his pictures, I feel like he would come inside the shop. Every time I'm there, I feel like my brother would come, but he doesn't come.
The boy, I must say that he's a very strong person, but even though, it must be very difficult for him to stay in the same place where his brother was killed. But then there is other thing that he's doing. He's very proactive. He plays soccer. He loves soccer, and he's very focused, even though he kind of lost, he was very disturbed, when this thing was still so very fresh. But now, after a few months after this thing happened, he seems to be picking up.
Only one specialised child trauma centre serves Alexandra, with its estimated population of more than 500,000 people. A grim picture painted across South Africa's overcrowded townships.
But just looking at a community like Alex, how many of the children that we have seen the violence in Alex have gotten any sort of intervention? But the reality is, parents really felt a need to say, my child was exposed to this man being shot, I want therapy for this child. We do see a lot of children that have been traumatized by witnessing violent crimes. And when they come here, because it's a traumatic experience, they come with trauma, and a lot of them are presenting with nightmares, fear of the areas that are going to sort of revoke the incident that happened to him to come back. So they are going to have nightmares and flashbacks, but a lot of children are going to present with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Specialists in the childcare sector gather for the launch of a recent study into the extent to which children in South Africa are exposed to violence. The study was the first of its kind, looking at all forms of violence affecting our children and not just a specific category. Professor Cathy Ward from the University of Cape Town's Psychology Department was one of the primary researchers.
The prevalence rates that we found across all the forms of violence were high. When we compare that to the global average, they were higher than the global average, but also when you calculate an average in that sort of way, you calculate a range of things from the lowest to the highest. What we found was that we were not outside of that range. We were in the range that has been reported in other countries, but we're at the high end of the range and above the global average in all forms of violence. In a sense, from a mental health perspective, witnessing violence and experiencing violence lead to the same kinds of consequences. So post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and sometimes children become aggressive because they act out their distress. So there's a range of mental health and behavioural things that children can experience as a result of witnessing and being exposed to violence as victims themselves, being direct victims.
Experts and policymakers have grappled with the underlying cause of the high incidence of violence plaguing the South African social landscape, and the focus has now also shifted to intergenerational effects this has had on our children.
I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge as a country is that we have a violent history, that we are a country where violence has been normalized. And I think we have, as a society, turned a blind eye in the effect of what the violent protests have done, what xenophobia has done in our children, what they see on the media, where children, when they see violence, it's normal for them. They look as ways of conflict resolution, to say, if I don't agree with you, then I have to resort to violence. And this manifests itself in different areas of their functionality.
One of the other findings that's coming through from the international literature is that these consequences can endure for a very long time and often have very diffuse consequences in children's lives. So It's not just mental health and physical health that we have to worry about, but the kind of behavioural health.
In communities like these on the Cape Flats, violence has become entrenched as a way of life. In search of identity, respect, money and empowerment, gang life becomes a way of survival.
Recently there was a big gang thing, the 360s and the luxury kids. They started fighting, stabbing one another and stuff like that. But half of the gang members are on the school, so now I don't like you or you stole my girl, then I want trouble with you, and then I start stabbing you or giving you crumbs, throwing stones at you and stuff like that. Eventually you're gonna get tired, you're gonna wanna do something back, and then there's where the whole thing started.
National crime statistics show that almost 20% of murders in the Western Cape are gang-related, an average of nearly one person every day. There are no reliable estimates of child members in the Cape Flats gangs, but a growing number of children as young as 9 and 10 are getting involved.
The gang leaders, it's almost like they're using the younger children to shoot and do stuff that they want them to do, so they can relax and just look at their point of view. Okay, you do that and you do that, and almost like they're just giving you stuff to do, and so they don't come in trouble. You go to jail. It's your life that's being messed up, stuff like that.
Researchers hope that the latest Optimum study into violence affecting children will shed more light on what interventions could help to untangle a very complex network of socio-economic and intergenerational factors that have kept communities like these on the Cape Flats in the grip of violent cycles.
There's also a second component to the study, which is really looking at the agency responses. So looking at if a report is made, how is the report dealt with? Are the responses adequate enough? And the idea really is to have a look at this is what the population of 15 to 7-year-olds are saying with regard to their experiences, and this is what the agency responses are, and this is now how we can move forward in terms of making sure that there are adequate resources. Are we spending our resources with regard to child protection services in the way that it should, or what are some of those changes that can be made? Because ultimately what we would like to see is if we invest money and if we spend resources on, let's say for example, one form of abuse, does it make a difference with regard to, or does it alleviate other forms of abuse that might be happening at the same time?
You have a lot of mirrors around you. You can see what's going on, so you can see what you're putting yourself into. These druggies, the shooting, this gangsterism, stuff like that. You've got a lot of mirrors in front of you, so if someone tries to encourage you to do this and do that, you can tell for yourself, no, I don't want to do that because I can see what it's doing to people, and you don't want to go down that road. You try to live a normal life, being successful in the future.
One in 4 children interviewed in the Optimus study say they've witnessed some form of family violence.
It just destroys them. I will never forget last night that he was still in the house where my son sobbed bitterly, and we were hiding in the bedroom and with the door locked while he was bashing on the door, screaming and shouting at us, and he just cried, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, I can't do this anymore, I can't take this anymore."
She said it.
For Megan, it was the impact of her husband's abuse on their children that eventually gave her the courage to leave.
He has terrible anxiety. He had terrible anxiety then. Separation anxiety from me. To try get them to school was a huge thing. They would cry, they would cling on to me. As they've gotten older, they worry about me, they want to protect me, and I've had to teach them that I'm big and strong enough to look after myself. Bedwetting, all of them, to this day still. It broke them, destroyed them.
No, I was afraid Dad was gonna leave Mom because they now fights too much. I still love him, just I don't like what he does. He doesn't speak to us or ask if we want to come visit anymore. So
we have a choice to go and see him or not see him. I don't really talk about my parents to my friends. My mom's told me about it, about most of the stuff, like what her dad used to do to us and why she divorced him and stuff like that. So I just don't really remember it. I can't really figure out the picture, but yeah, I know that it did happen.
One of the other things about all of those consequences is that they impair children's ability to succeed at school. Children who don't succeed at school so well are less likely to find jobs and become taxpayers. So in a way, child maltreatment costs the country twice over. Once because we have to deal with the perpetrator, we have to go through the criminal justice system, we have to provide the victim with physical and mental health treatment. And again, because those victims, if they're not really well treated, are less likely to become good taxpayers, contributing back into the nation's coffers. So we have to bear in mind that child maltreatment has a very high cost for the individual and for the country.
You know, whenever we deal with trauma, we understand that there's going to be a negative effect. Initially, it requires that for them to make the change. However, I think in the long term, there's always a benefit to helping them see the positive side of things, being able to empower a woman so that she really can empower her children, teaching the children so that boys need to handle situations in certain ways, they treat women in certain ways. And by staying in a domestic violence situation, we're teaching them that that's okay. By leaving it, I think we're teaching them a whole different lesson, and we're breaking that cycle.
What I see now, I know that the cycle is broken. They're very well aware of what's right, what's wrong. They've witnessed and seen a lot. They're wise beyond their years. It breaks my heart because they should still be children. But I do not believe that they will continue that pattern.
I'm going to make it an O. That's star. B-O-A-T. Boat.
Megan says despite having the strength to walk away from her abusive husband, she could not find the courage to report his abuse to the police. Underreporting remains prevalent with this type of abuse. One of Megan's biggest concerns, as with many other women, was the impact that a criminal case against her estranged husband could have on their children. Professor Anne Skelton from the Centre for Child Law at Wits University says although the legal frameworks are in place to guide police officers to deal with children, the experience at station level is very different.
You need specialised training to know how to interview children. There is a risk that children become victimised all over again through having to repeatedly tell their stories. And so whilst the procedures are there and there is a way to do this that is known, sometimes the people on the ground that are working with it don't actually know properly how to do it, and so consequently children do sometimes go through rather harrowing experiences and having to retell their stories.
Oftentimes people don't go and report incidences of violence that they experience for many different reasons, one of which is obviously that firstly they don't think that it's necessary to report, and then also that they don't think that reporting would make a difference. And I think that alone speaks to the fact that firstly, I think that violence is so normalized that people don't recognize when there is a situation that they've encountered that they actually necessitates a report. And then secondly, they probably just, I think, have lost faith in the system by feeling that even if they did make a report, that it wouldn't make a difference.
Law can never fully be the answer here because of the fact that you can't foresee every situation and the law can't come into every household. So it's very important. Legal enforcement of laws is obviously important, but at the same time we need a more preventive approach. And prevention is really a very wide-ranging issue that goes well beyond the domain of the Justice Department. It goes to the domain of social development, health, education. All of these departments could play and should play a very important role in the prevention, early detection, early intervention when it comes to these kinds of offences.